You're listening to One Feather, Two Pens. Lessons and stories from Indigenous peoples, building and navigating digital sovereignty. A special series on What's That Noise?
We're all spread out across the country, but I'm going to focus today not just on Victoria, but Vancouver Island, the traditional and unceded territories of a few nations, and I'm going to do my best to capture as many as I can here. In Victoria specifically, we've got the Esquimalt, Songhees, Malahat, Pacheedaht, Tsuk, and Wasanich nations, which include Pakwachin, Sarlip, Tsawit, Tsaikam. I think that's all of them. I've missed any. I'm so sorry. Those are part of the Kwangman-speaking peoples. And then we head a little bit further north of Victoria, where we get into Snuneymuxw, Snawanas, Kwatsun, Tapos, Salut, Silitsa, Liksum, Pulij, Chae, Che, and of course, Comox, and where I come from, Cape Mudge, or the Wee K, Wee Kum, the Kwagilth, and Tliamin. Up on the northern end. We recognize these nations and the impacts of colonialization and the importance of reconciliation, and that the work we do here, I hope, is a reflection of our efforts there. We are committed to building those respectful, beautiful relationships with Indigenous people and learning more about their histories and their cultures and their stories. And that's what I find so amazing about this podcast, is we get to do that with individuals who have a real passion and love for Indigenous people and communities across the country. We strive to honor those stories and those relationships, not only here in the moment, but those that have come before us and have shaped this land. And we work towards a future of justice and equity and fairness for all. It's my hope that by acknowledging Indigenous people, and particularly those on Vancouver Island, in this way, which I hope is a good way, the Indigenous people who have stewarded the land for generations, and that we can take a step towards reconciliation and building respectful relationships through conversations like this, but more importantly, I think, through the actions we undertake. I welcome you into this podcast, Sam and Tamara. We really look forward to our conversation with you today. Gela Kesla,
Gela Kesla. Well, I'm really happy to be here today. I'm happy that you're doing this podcast. It gives such a great opportunity to share the happenings of Indigenous economics, and especially in the area of technology. I am passionate about Indigenous economics from a unique perspective as an artist and somebody that really works hard to understand and learn not just culture, but land and why the land is so important. Something as an Indigenous artist myself, I believe that if we don't feed back to our cultural keepers and language keepers and artists, that we don't have an Indigenous economy, because that's the entire purpose of reconciliation, is to hold our culture and our ways of being. And so I'm very, very passionate about Indigenous businesses of all kinds. I'm very aware and well-researched over the past 3 decades on what the barriers are for Indigenous businesses, both having been one myself and also having worked with many, many Indigenous nations, First Nations and Indigenous businesses across Canada. So it very much pleases me to have Sam here with me today, which is one of my best partners for bringing new technology in a respectful way to our community. I'm also passionate about Indigenous folks working with Canadian businesses to build the Canadian economy. These are lands that we share, and I've learned through sitting on many negotiations tables and being mentored by many elders that this is our lands, and we're all here together to build a future for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. So just happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, you guys.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us. And I'll follow Lawrence's footsteps a little bit there. He had such a nice land acknowledgement. And Tamara and I, are here in Vancouver. And one thing that we say at the church that I attend every week is that we say we live, work, and worship on the lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, Coast Salish First Nations. So we're here really excited to be sharing this technology with you. I think when you look at Tamara and I, you think, okay, we're talking economics. There's an Asian guy here, but it's actually Tamara that's the brains. She's the real brains behind all this. So I'm just here to support her. I'm fortunate to work in real impact businesses. We focus on technology and how technology can uplift communities. And I think we've gotten to a point now where the work that Tamara and I are doing is very impactful with very, very little change management. And we're excited to share that with you today.
Oh, that's awesome. All of our listeners are going to be, wait, what? Asian? Then they're going to Google and LinkedIn search Sam Chung.
Welcome all. Welcome all.
Welcome all. Yeah. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, that's fantastic. So let's get into it. It's always a pleasure and so much fun for us to have these conversations with Indigenous people from across the country around this digital ecosystem. I hate that word, but this digital space that's always kind of evolving and transcending what it was last week, right? And just in terms of how quickly it all moves. And so part of my kind of love and what I want to learn from my Indigenous colleagues and allies and friends is, how are Indigenous people navigating this space? How are they owning what's happening in this space so that whatever comes out the other end of it is not another version or a different version or some altered version of some colonial model that either by accident or design continues to oppress Indigenous people. And so it's my view that if we're going to have some control over this, Indigenous people and their allies and their friends have to take a leadership role and have to dive in there and do the heavy lifting to make sure that it's done in a good way. I use that good quote unquote way that lifts our people up and leaves that table better set than we found it. And so I'll open it up with this question. What values in your journey, in either of your journey or both your journeys, through the various organizations you've worked with, the activities or the businesses you've championed, all the efforts you've done to grow, your companies and the impact you've had, that impact, what have you learned, and how have these values and these principles that have informed your vision for Indigenous communities in the digital space, how have they taken shape? What does that look like?
I think there are many gaps, and historically, that's been my role, is to look at the gaps between industry, large corporations, the government, and First Nations businesses on multiple levels, from social assistance with Indigenous and Northern Affairs, they're called now.
Yeah.
Right? But in looking at those gaps, I think that what I see emerging, without going into the complexity of say, like the entire mining industry of all of BC, is that Indigenous people always are bringing new and green and the best of new and green technologies to the forefront to solve problems for energy saving, for cleaning up the lands, remediating lands. And so I've seen a plethora of amazing technologies over the years that really went nowhere. And then I started asking, well, why are these technologies going nowhere? I mean, one was an injection into the ground that used nanotechnology to remediate the land.
Wow.
In 3 months versus 6 years.
Amazing.
And so these are impressive technologies. And so one of the gaps was that there wasn't enough funding to actually verify a new technology, but yet they keep coming. And so we had to build business models, and we had to connect those business models to high value. And this is where my colleague Sam comes in with a new technology that is going to change the way that we all indoor air that we're breathing across Canada. Is going to reduce infection and viral loads in commercial spaces, and can in private spaces as well. But what needed to happen is we needed to get out. I needed to get out to the large corporations and to the government and be heard. And I couldn't be heard as a nonprofit. I couldn't be heard as a First Nations partner. I really had to develop a business model that matched Indigenous economics and that was heard in industry. And this is going for both software, because we have third-party software companies. Somebody could have partnered with Seapolar, with Sam, and they would be getting a very small fraction. It would not have extended in an Indigenous economic model in the way that it is now. So I guess my answer to your question is, in my world, I needed to redevelop business models that made sense from an Indigenous perspective so that we were fully embedded in the whole business model moving forward. And that's the same thing for software technology and the sovereignty of that and our data, which I love that you guys do, as well as for new green technology.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, Lawrence, that's such a great question. And I want to pat Tamara on the back a little bit. She's not getting into all the stuff that she's done, but something as simple as give backs. She has developed a give back program that feeds right into this economic model of how you create a chain that supports the community while developing new technology. And so, something as simple as she's an artist by training. And I know that yourself and Tommy, I see Tommy has a ton of guitars on the wall. I grew up, all of my degrees are in music. So I grew up as a musician. So we have that commonality. But, she has this program. And so C Polar, we have these wall hangings. And it's basically, it's this thing right here behind me. And you can put artwork on it. You can put a mirror, you can put a whiteboard, and it's an air purifier that captures and eradicates virus, bacteria, mold, and fungus. And so it's like a HEPA filter on 1,000%, right? And that's what it does. And we're now working with Tamara and the artists from her community to put Indigenous artwork on that. And then Tamara is connected to large corporations that care about Indigenous and Indigenous growth. And so then she has worked a give back in. So these artists get commissioned for the work and then they get paid back for the work that they're doing. And, any culture, if you look at it, although in Canada, we need to do more for the arts here. And we grew up, all of us grew up as artists. We don't do enough, but every culture is based on the arts that they have created. You look back at cultures and the findings are always revolving around the tools they created. What did they do? What specifies this specific culture? I'm one of those, people that watch PBS and you see those blankets that are $800,000 from the first chief and whatever. And it brings tears to your eye when you see like these cultural pieces coming back. And I think what Tamara does really, really well is she creates a pipeline to feed the economics back into her community. And that's at the core of everything that I've seen, which is why we've been so excited to partner with her. C Polar Technology is the first of its kind. There's nothing else like it. You don't have to pay millions of dollars to plug something in, to spray something or lights or what. You pull out your filter, you put in this filter. That's all it is. And the technology in the filter kills virus, bacteria, mold, fungus, all the stuff that's making people sick. And now our biggest enemy is wildfire smoke. That's coming no matter where you are. It doesn't know borders. It doesn't have to get a green card. It's just there. And so C Polar is the only technology that has nano flashing, which is literally the difference between positive and negative. It is a positively charged surface. Virus, bacteria, mold, and fungus, it's all negative. And when they come into contact with it, it destroys the membrane of that cell and it eradicates it.
Wow. I don't know what to say other than wow. That's great. Tamara, you've spoken about new economic models based on natural law. You have these amazing technologies and the application for that would obviously have a home in Indigenous communities across the country, and I think would be well received and life changing. How do you see these technologies intersecting though with traditional Indigenous knowledge systems? Are there specific traditional principles that you find particularly compatible with this in terms of the technologies that you're using? How do you get people to listen when you're talking in those communities? Should there be guardrails around some of these conversations? Love to hear more about that.
I think we should have guardrails, 100%. I think it's important that everybody always has an elder to refer to. And anytime I've felt lost, I've just stopped acting, to be honest with you. If I haven't had an elder, especially on the idea of in the environment, there's some places like that have said, okay, we're going to build this pipeline. How on earth could you even begin to advise on what the environmental standards should be without the perspectives of the elders and cultural keepers? But I'm just going to quickly take one step back because I don't think in the role that I get to harbor in new technology, it is the communities, and we're developing other technology to be able to reach out to the communities.
Yeah.
I think technology is allowing us to reach everybody at once, which is incredibly important. But when it comes to paying royalties, such as the art on the air filters, what this means is that it needs to be scale. And that's not our first product. So I was hired as the president of Ethelholtzy Facilities Management. And so most of what I do is I identify really great partners, either for the nation, for myself, for anything that's going to fuel the Indigenous economy. That's what I'll go and I'll find. So that's my special talent, I think. And then ensuring everybody's taken care of, like shareholders and artists.
Yeah.
So our partner is DesNet, and they're somewhere in the midst of a few $100 million as a group of company, and they're located, they're owned by the English River First Nation in Saskatchewan. Our other partner is BGIS Facilities Management, and they're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. That they manage over 550 million square feet of space. Now, the unique opportunity that we have here is scale. Corporations such as the federal government and banks and telecommunication companies are the clients of BGIS Facilities Management. So now all of a sudden we have an Indigenous partnership identifying technologies that align with our values. We have, in order for me to keep track of my elders and community participation, I've collectively created a nonprofit. That nonprofit board is elders, Indigenous youth, and hereditary matriarchs and chiefs. And so they will oversee a lot of the give back. So if we have give back, it's going to go to that nonprofit. They're going to oversee it, track it, and comment on the many projects we are doing to bring those funds in. And I just want to share one more. You say, how do we keep our culture intact? We had we commissioned 4 artists to do paintings called the 4 Sacred Medicines, all from different nations. They were commissioned for the work. Their art materials were paid for. We hired an Indigenous youth crew to take their stories. So we filmed their stories, and then we high quality scanned them and made limited edition prints. And so these are stories that are approved by the First Nations. The stories are properly told. A plaque goes out everywhere that the limited editions are sold. Beyond that, we worked with a Canadian manufacturer and made a commercial carpet. And that commercial carpet, we're approaching about $1 million in sales now. It's going all over the world. Australia, CN Tower is installing it right now. And so the artists get royalties, again, scale. They get 5% royalties for that piece. And then we had a retail collection made, and that retail collection has gone out in Walmart. So, we start to stack the give back. We have the nonprofit that it goes to, and at every step of the way, there is proper Indigenous protocol to manage these things. So I hope that kind of answers a little snippet, of the types of business models we're working with. And all the while, I'm negotiating with every non-Indigenous partner to ensure, and I live in spreadsheets sometimes, just to ensure if I'm on somebody's land, I know I can for sure say I can give this % give back to that community. I know how to speak to the shareholders, to the board, and to get the agreements signed and legally ratified in moving forward.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. It's really interesting to hear about an economic lens and a business model that reveals the kind of values that we're really interested in exploring on One Feather, Two Pens. But I'd be remiss to not take the opportunity to ask you a little bit more about the tech, because I know, as fascinating as these stories are, it's not the whole picture. There, in our discovery, Sam, you'd mentioned a little bit about Entourage, and this is something that the two of you are working on as well?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So Tamara and I are involved in a number of initiatives, and every initiative that we're working on supports this community. So Entourage is a hiring tool that helps companies hire quickly with diversity in mind. Up to 85% of successful hires are referrals, people that are trusted within the community of workers. So what we're doing is we're supercharging the recruiters and the HR team by saying, hey, you've already hired 500 people, 700 people. These are your most trusted resources to bring in new people. So what we've done with Tamara, because she has access to this really large community of Indigenous candidates who are educated, they've gone to university, they've been trained through a training program, and the need for high skilled labor right now is so high. But these people are working hard to get a degree or get a diploma or certificate, and they're like, where am I going to go next? So with our relationships to large corporations and with Tamara's relationships to all the universities and Indigenous programs, we're going to create a database of high quality, vetted, educated Indigenous candidates. And we're going to give these corporations access to the most valued high quality candidates, and everything will be done seamlessly. It'll be a white glove turnkey service, and they'll get the highest quality candidates possible.
Are you keeping track of like the impact that's had? So like in terms of like numbers or results, what does that look like?
We're doing our pilot project right now. And so the technology is ready. So we've just got a very prominent technical school, very large, and a very prominent university actually on Vancouver Island that are involved. And so when I'm an employment counselor that works for a prominent university or the Squamish Nation Trade Center, for example, it's that person's role to get the jobs. And so this technology is a blessing for them to get their good candidates up. But yes, we would love to share the numbers with you and everything, because I think the next email I get the most of is everybody from the corporations asking me who I know.
From your perspective and your experience, what are the prerequisites? What are the gaps that you tend to see other people not paying attention to? And what is it that you're able to do differently to make sure that your solutions and your offerings don't stumble into those same places?
Well, I think the first thing is to have partners that fully understand that our data is sovereign. And so let's say Altourage picks up great steam, and like we're basically managing a controlled explosion. That's already how much interest is in this. And so it's the ability that I've learned from my elders is you need to move slowly. These are important technologies for our people, but if we lose control of technology as Indigenous people now, what's going to happen, not even to just us, but all cultures, it's going to be a digital colonization. That's what's happening. So there's a third party. If a third party has access to your data, you're no longer in control, because it's your data that at the end of the day is going to be very valuable. Now, Indigenous people, we're the most researched people in Canada. There's entire industries off of researching First Nations information. And in fact, so much so that I downloaded a report once that sort of had the National Defence Economic Division working with the Indian and Northern Affairs. So I sort of saved the report. I didn't look deeply into it, but we're very powerful economically, Indigenous people. If we own our own data, wouldn't it be nice to know? One of the reasons, for example, that we can't get up to this 5% Indigenous procurement is because we don't understand the business community. We also don't understand the student community. Now, if I'm a nation negotiating a major project, I'm going to say, I want you to hire X amount of people in X amount of positions. It's quite normal to ask a project, what are the positions that you'll be needing upcoming? And then to use that submission to create a legal document that says you're going to hire X, Y, and Z to ensure that we have laddering with careers. But if we don't know what students are out there, what they're curious about, what they're studying about, then you can't make accurate agreements. Okay, so one, we need to have partners like Sam, where I know his entire tech team. And if there's going to be something in the future that is mining the data that we have available, then we will sit down in, sort of within our letter of intent that we move through this carefully. But there'll be a sovereignty to the data that is collected, and a democracy if the data is disseminated. And that's the same with, we're building a separate one through for our future, which is procurement with Indigenous businesses. Exactly the same thing. The data needs to be sovereign, and it needs to be democratized. And if it's going to be monetized, then it needs to have a fair give back to
absolutely.
the
community. I mean, it warms my heart to hear that. When I think about sovereignty of anything, for an Indigenous perspective, it's not only ownership but possession. Right? You can't have sovereignty if those two things are absent. I share the same sentiment that Indigenous perspectives can be are often marginalized in technology development. So being aware of that and protecting against that is so important. It can't just be about the money. I'd ask for you both to share, how do you measure success? I'd like to get a sense of your vision or your view of alternate, if you like. If we go back to that natural law conversation around economics, what are the alternative indicators that might better reflect Indigenous values in this space and in the work that you're doing? What does that look like?
So first of all, in negotiations, we developed an economic graphic, and that economic graphic dealt with 4 aspects of land wellness and 4 aspects of people wellness. That was developed because at the negotiation tables that I got to sit at the end of the day, you're having these minor percentages, and everybody's forgotten about the people and they've forgotten about the land.
Yeah.
Moving forward, what I realized when I said historically we would share with everybody, in an ecosystem, you have something called a mother tree. And that mother tree is communicating with mycelium all over the forest. It's retaining thousands of years of history. It's rerouting water. It's informing and holding all of that rich history and using that knowledge to keep the entire ecosystem that mother tree is responsible for healthy. It's no different with a corporation. There is zero downfall to having a corporation that effectively gives back. All that's going to happen is that more will come in. And so you need to understand that being a leader is a responsibility. Being a large corporation is you're choosing to be a mother tree in a forest. That means that your give back always needs to equal your take. But the thing that I discovered on my spreadsheets when I did my master's project was when one operates like that, you're essentially taking in more all of the time, because every time you give out something of value comes back. In a potlatch system, when the chiefs would have their big giveaways, many times those giveaways would be medicine patches or tools or something to different families. The chief is investing in his community. And when that investment happens, of course, more is coming back and more is coming back to the chief, and he is having more and more to give away. So the very health of his people is the very health of the chief or the matriarch or the mother tree, or in modern economic times, it is the corporation. The more you give, the more you have. It's a basic principle of the mathematics of nature, right?
I love the analogy. I mean, it's beautiful. I'll often tell our corporate partners and remind them that the real measure of success is not by what we keep, it's by what we give back. And it often stuns me how often I have to be explicit in that statement with our partners, because it's just about extraction, right? And the traditional kind of corporate bottom line stuff that happens when you go out into the world, right? Especially if you have investors who aren't properly aligned with what your mission and impact is. And so it gets harder and harder to navigate.
I love numbers and I love patterns. And so on a spreadsheet, you're wealthier with these economic models. We wouldn't have a commercial carpet, and it wouldn't have gotten into Walmart, and it wouldn't have done all of these things. It wouldn't be in the CN Tower all over the world right now if we did not have a give back. But the commercial led to the retail, led to the limited editions, led to a clothing line, led to Sea Polar. And that's because we took it the right way. And so when I put all of I call it creative factors, and we're very creative. And if you're weaving things together and having that open mind to create new systems, that is Indigenous. Because what I was taught was, when we modernize our culture, our responsibility as young people and working with elders is to take the knowledge and apply it to the modern day. And so we are always shifting and changing. And part of that is eldership. But what I learned was the economic system of the natural growth pattern of nature is exponentially will return on your investment significantly more funds. And it's like your Fibonacci spiral. Okay. So it's a round economic system that multiplies. And when you put that onto a spreadsheet, and I have to show this to shareholders and investors all the time, it's growing roots. And so you need to slow down, let those roots grow. And then of course, every time it multiplies, it's multiplying by itself plus I forget the number, like 1.21 to the power of.
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. Let's talk about future vision. We're 15 years into the future. Where does Indigenous digital identity sit? What does it look like? How's it realized? Is it flourishing? What does it look like? What would be fundamentally different than in today's digital landscape?
No, listen, these are great questions. And, I think Tommy said before we started, this conversation could go all afternoon. And I think that's very true now that we're, a little bit into this and we're just opening this coconut. But for me, I like Tamara, when we first talked, she said to me, Sam, do you know what percentage of the population of Indigenous people are under 40? And she's like, right now we're on the precipice of supporting this community. And when there's obviously the conversation that goes towards the venture capital groups, the VCs, and we're all entrepreneurs on this call. We know what people are thinking and feeling. But the grassroots of this is so that in 15 years, every Indigenous, BIPOC, person of color, everyone has the same opportunities. Yes, there is a monetary value, as you said, but everything's about giving back first. Because entrepreneurs, we have to pay all the money up front and we don't know what's coming back, right? So we pay it all out first. And the give back starts with us. The give back starts where we say, damn the torpedoes, we're going to go forward because we know this is good and we're going to make an impact. And I think as an Asian person, as a Korean person, the alignment that we have with the Indigenous community, because everything's about elders. It's all about supporting our elders. And so it really feels like we're supporting our elders by taking care of the next generation.
As Indigenous people, we need to do more than to watch new technology come. If you're bringing a new water technology into a nation, many nations are now sort of cluing in to two things. One, yes, we will support that water technology. Two, we're going to own that water technology. And three, new business models. Don't just do a cash model. Nations need to have an asset-based model that's holding the contracts, et cetera, and a cash-based model, which is the one that's taking in the dollars. So if Sam's sea polar technology comes to a community, the community can have a business of owning that technology so that they're dispersing water to all corporations on their territory and taking care of their lands. So it's just rethinking things. Sam's correct. Getting these economic ideologies out to young people is incredibly important. They need to understand what mistakes were made in partnerships historically, what can be done differently now. And we've just started a corporation. We've got lots of experience now. We're looking at not just cash, but assets, and then the transfer of those assets to the next generation. For technology, hold space. Blockchain wasn't ready. I've been looking into that like crazy because it's sort of not blockchain and crypto, but blockchain's ability to hold Indigenous data and identities when it comes to connecting that with language and arts. So that, we developed it enough to know that it's a really great opportunity. The monetization of it so that it can be something that's embedded is important to look at. So creating space by not giving it all away. Many nations, including my own, will save land and not even consider developing it because it will be the next. We have land that 5 generations now, they'll get to imagine what it should be. And we've committed to not developing that today. And it needs to be the same way with technology, whereby we don't give everything away, but we develop with on a strong principle of sovereignty. What you're doing with One Feather, so very important. I look at a lot of health data. And I sit on a lot of boards with new health data and wearables and this and that. Imagine our economic data or health data just being all out there willy-nilly, which it currently is. If we allow third parties to come through, then you're going to have somebody the size of these oligarchs that exist. Instead, we need to keep supporting what you're doing with data, with digital identity. That digital identity should also hold our healthcare status. So that we are reporting out to the government and holding space for the next young person to come on and provide another solution and do well because of it.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Tamara and Sam, we want to thank you both so very, very much for taking time out of your day to share your wonderful perspectives on Indigenous economics and technology, and for sharing a bit of your experience and wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Lovely people, lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.